Willardson, who's my aunt.
Oh.
But she's no longer in the city there.
Well, we're honored you chose us.
Yeah, our council meeting is a lot more fun than Syracuse.
Oh, I bet.
So we're glad you're
They got a
here.
lot of stuff going on up there.
I'm sure they do. Yeah. Everybody back?
We're ready to
We're
go.
good?
We're live.
All right, we're back. We skipped ahead to item 9 on the agenda. So what we have left is we have a mayor's report, we have a council member's report, we have the city manager's report. So next on the agenda is
And
items.
a closed meeting.
Huh?
And a closed meeting.
Yes, and a closed meeting. So the mayor's report is next, item number 7. I have a potpourri of things I can choose from, but I'm just going to choose kind of a couple, 2 or 3 we'll find hopefully very interesting. So in conjunction with what Lynn Keddington was just telling us, I have been working on what's called a wellness group, and we have named it Centerville Cares. And I have formed a group of about 12 to 15 people. We have the police chief, we have doctors, we have Davis Health. I just reached out to Reed Newey to get somebody from Davis School District. He's our superintendent. We have a person in the community that suffers from depression, a family that lost a son to suicide. And this all stems from the fact that when the chief told me that so many of their calls that they go out on are mental illness calls. And so, but we want to be positive with it. And so it is the wellness group. We're not trying to diagnose. We're not doing any of that. We leave the professionals that. We're trying to provide opportunities to our citizens to serve, be healthy, get involved in theater, get involved in our activities we have going on in our city. We're just trying to be a resource that can help provide that. And so when I hear of things like this taking place, we're thrilled. Now, as part of what we're doing, as the chief mentioned, I think on an emergency preparedness over at the theater on September 8th, is that it, Bill? Where we're having a, yeah, that he said one of the theaters we could use as part of this wellness group as well too.
Sure,
you know?
absolutely. Put together a presentation.
Yeah. So that's one thing that one big thing that we've been working on. The next thing is, as Steve reported this morning, we got together with Hogan Industries and myself and Dan Sontag, and we reinitiated the sign coming in to the town on 1250 West. It's been going on a long time, and I just wanted to get it done. And so that's one reason I said bring it to them tonight for that extra $900. So you can call Kevin in the morning, and he can get his work done, and then we can turn it over to Dan and the representative from Hogan to get this sign in. They're still on board in wanting to help on the funding of that. And I mentioned to them, Councilwoman Fillmore, they said that they'd been involved with you and you might have some interest on that. So if you want to be involved on that too, great, but I'm trying to put on a fast track to get that done. So that was when Steve mentioned, hey, should we get Hogan back in? I said, yes, let's make sure they're still on board. So that's another thing we're working on. Bill and I will be meeting next week, as he suggested, with Steve and Jake on this tax increment thing and looking that over so we can get a decision made on that as well too. Today we had the quick quack ribbon cutting. It was kind of fun. Did you have fun there, Robin?
Yeah, it was way fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. They've done a nice project down there. You know, they did the ribbon cutting, then they showed us how it worked and had some lunch and let us take our cars through. And so that's a business that's supporting our community. It's interesting to see, if you've driven by it, how they've affected the drive with Dairy Queen, where that's opened up for Dairy Queen more. It might be tricky the next 10 days because they're offering free car washes. But, and then coming out, you actually go through Colonial Lumber's lot. So they were obviously worked with Colonial Lumber and Dairy Queen in getting all that to take place. But that was a good day, time and a good new business to our city. And then another thing is that I had South Davis Metro Fire a meeting yesterday. Because this, I won't discuss everything we had at that meeting, but since this affects us so closely, the chief mentioned that he's going to Planning Commission next week. This is for the station being built in Centerville. And to us, on our first meeting in August 7th, because he has to get building this. He's going to Planning Commission and us to get some text amendments done. He says he's got to break ground in the fall, else he's going to have some real problems with some leasing. So that's the big thing that affects us. And I never knew that ambulances cost $200,000. Did you guys know ambulance cost $200,000?
That sounds cheap to me, actually.
Cheap ambulance.
Yeah, so we approved the purchase of a $204,000 ambulance. They're going to get $20,000 out of the old ambulance, but that was in the budget. I mean, it was approved in the budget, but that was another thing as well too. And then he showed a presentation of all the fires they've been fighting over the last 2 or 3 weeks. We had one in our city up on the hill, up above Rolling Hills. And I was following that, and I hate to go out and ever get involved in something because I'm not trained to do that. I leave it to the professionals. But as it was dying down, I drove up there about 12:30 a.m. and he was on the street up there, and we chatted how Farmington came to it from the north side and we came to it from the south side, South Davis Metro. And the residents were freaking out up there, and they said, "Don't just go in your homes, you're okay." And they were able to keep it from coming down, and did a marvelous job in taking care and handling that fire. West Bountiful's been having quite a few down there. I mean, Mayor Romney's been dealing with a lot down there, but I think that was the only one that he mentioned we'd have in our city. I don't know if I'm missing any, if you guys know of any others. So they did a wonderful job with that.
Just if I can interrupt,
You bet.
because of the community core and emergency response, I got information from Paul Child actually that when that was happening, and had put the 2 areas most proximate to that fire on notice for possible evacuations at about 11 o'clock that night.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of did a stand down at about 12:30.
Thank you, Bill, because he said that it was coming down fast.
Yeah.
And that's about when I went up, about 12:30, and they were just looking at hot spots and that sort of thing. Yeah. Excellent, but thank you.
It was fun to listen to them say that Bill Ince is here if you want to talk to the, 'cause
Really?
I was listening on the scanner,
Neat.
so, but yep, we've got it all handled.
Neat, wonderful.
Thanks.
The last thing on George's going to talk about Utopia. UIA, the only thing that's happened recently is, of course, Layton was going ahead with some build out, so they were approving some bonds. Originally, I was one of 9 that didn't vote for these bonds, and because of the fact that they came to me with the contract that was blank with no dates, with no amounts, and I said, I just can't sign that sort of contract. But they did get amounts and dates in it, and the bond attorney, who happens to live in our city, was just updating us with the writing of those bonds. There was no vote taking place or that type of thing. Did I cover all the important things? Any questions for me? So that's my report. So there've been a lot of positive, good things taking place. So we'll go to item number 8 then, and have a liaison report from Councilman McEwen.
Okay, well, as far as the Utopia UIA, there's a packet attached. If you have any specific questions, let me know and I can answer to those. The financials are there.
Can I just say, it floored me that their wages are 60% of their budget. I mean, I know it takes boots on the ground to install fiber, but to have 60% of your budget be wages, just,
Well, they get
it explained a lot to me.
They get all the equipment for free. That's why, because all the underlying cost is in the other company. Right, George?
You're talking about as far as like the assets of Utopia and then the
UIA.
wholesale buyback from UIA? Yes.
Yeah.
The physical assets are all over in Utopia.
Yep.
So all the maintenance, all
Well,
the,
let me
Go
qualify
ahead.
that. It is, they have assets in both, but the bulk of the network
the bulk,
exists
yeah.
in Utopia.
right. That's why, Stephanie. I mean,
I just thought, wow.
it almost needs to be looked at as a single company, but it's not.
Right.
It should, but isn't, yeah.
It's definitely two separate legal entities. Well, so let's get to the fun stuff. Let's talk mosquitoes.
Excited, they've got West Nile.
Actually, yeah, we do. The last board meeting, we talked about a couple positives that have shown up in and around Davis County. Of course, if you've read the news articles, it makes it sound like West Nile is everywhere. That's probably a better stance to take because West Nile, if it shows up in one location, it's likely to show up in others fairly quickly. The lab that the board approved to actually help us in our response to determining whether or not we have West Nile virus is online. They're working out the kinks in that. They've asked for a board approval to let them buy a machine that lets them prepare more samples so they can do more sampling in less time and get a better response. But it's meeting the expectations of where we don't have to turn around with the Department of Health. Now, it's not certified yet. They have to send so many samples down, receive their certification, but everywhere that they expect to see a positive, like in a control, it shows up correctly. So I think the lab certification will happen very quickly. And the goal of that lab was so that as a mosquito abatement district, they could respond inside the same week. So they could sample on a Monday and a Tuesday, program their schedule, and be out in those affected areas inside the same week, where that turnaround was not possible with the state lab. It just didn't work out with the timing. So as always, I compliment Gary Hatch, who is our mosquito abatement director. Does a fantastic job, manages that budget really, really well. Other things of note is we have the drone in place this year that they're actually starting some of the initial flight testing and programming and training for that. They've negotiated with Hill Air Force Base so they can use that drone outside the fence line so they can get to some of these harder to get to areas. The goal eventually is to look at trying to reduce the footprint of going out into the Phragmite and out there with the four-wheel drives and doing all the damage, whereas we'll be able to sample the areas from the air, see where the water sources are, and then go drop the adulticide. It's a couple years before I think we're going to get to meaningful drone usage, but eventually I think we're going to see a lot more of it, so it's great as far as that goes. But if you are looking for where the West Nile virus maps are, they are posted on Facebook. There's a mosquito abatement page. Centerville is on track for its normal amount of spray requests. What the trend is, and this is definitely an impact of social media, is you'll get one neighbor who will call for a spray request, and then the whole street lights up with people wanting a spray request. And the mosquito abatement district tries to respond to those as expeditiously as they can, but whether it's 1 or 40, it doesn't change the scheduling. They can only hit so many areas. Other thing of note is if you've been looking at any of the papers, there was a big article about how a group in Western Australia managed to eliminate 80% of a mosquito called Aedes aegypti in an affected area, and that's the primary carrier of West Nile virus. To show you how good our mosquito abatement board is, we were trained a year and a half ago by our district manager on it's the Wolbachia bacteria and the research that's going on with if you have type A and you expose type B females to it, it renders the egg sterile. So I was reading this article and going, oh yeah, we're already on top of this. We know about it, we know about the technology, and our district is always trying to implement those things as fast as they become commercially practical. One question I get a lot about the fogging trucks is how come they don't come around more often? And the answer is because we are at our EPA limits for the chemicals we can spray. You have to alternate your chemistry, and we're at the limits of what we can. So This is the leftover mosquitoes that you're seeing. There's been a fantastic effort to get that all done. So that's the science content that goes along with it, but it's really great. The season is starting to wind down for the mosquito abatement. They have a pretty large temporary workforce that comes in during the summer months and in the spring to do all that work, and then they return to school or go on to serve missions or other activities that reduce that group. So next year, because of the number of individuals who aren't coming back, I would suggest if you know people who like to ride bikes and who want to work for the mosquito abatement district, that they start hitting up the district early spring, late winter, and try and get themselves on the list.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilman McEwen? Great, well, good. Move to item, skip over 9 we did, so we go to 10, city managers reports. So Steve?
Okay, if you look at my staff report, why don't you bring it up, Jake? Let's just go down here one by one and see if you agree with my proposed dates for these various topics and the setting in which we'll address them. As far as the first bullet is the cemetery capacity, I suggest that we schedule for maybe the next regular meeting a robust discussion of the question of whether we even want to study the possibility of a second cemetery. And if you do, then what direction you want to give us regarding that study. Does that sound okay? Schedule that
That's
question.
The 7th.
Okay. Then the Performing Arts Center HVAC commissioning report and the Centerpoint Theater's annual audit report ought to be handled in an RDA ACB meeting. I suggest that we do that on August 7th prior to the regular council meeting. Does that sound okay? We've been waiting on their annual report. It's later than it was supposed to have been, but they've finally taken it to their board this month, and so they can bring it to you next month. And then we have the Fred Hell request for tax increment reimbursement. Depending on the outcome of the meeting next week for the mayor, Bill, me, and Jake, we may be ready to report back to you on the 7th. Whether or not that involves the applicant, I guess I'll use that term at that meeting, we can talk about in our meeting next week. But if we have that, that would be an RDA meeting that could be held following the council meeting that night on the 7th. Then the Community Foundation Board meeting is set for August 21st prior to the regular council meeting. That involves the mayor and Bill. Sidewalk repair program and related tree policies. Okay, a staff group is working on this. We should be able to be ready for a discussion with the council later in August. I'm suggesting that we have a night set aside for that so that we have 2 or 3 hours. We can wrestle with the policy questions and also review staff's recommendations regarding the repair program, the priorities, how we apply the funding for this year. So I'm suggesting either, I think it's Tuesday the 28th or Wednesday the 29th, and maybe that would depend on whether there's a back-to-school night on one of those nights. We'd take the other night, perhaps. What do you think of that idea?
Tuesday would work better for me, but either way.
Anybody know what the school does on that week? Is that the week they go back to school?
Actually go back the 22nd.
Oh, the week before. So maybe the back-to-school night's the week before, or whatever they do on that first week. So you would, anybody object to the 28th? Okay.
Is that a 5 o'clock?
Well, let's, 5's a little early for some of you. I would say 5:30 or 6. What's your preference? We could feed you.
Doesn't matter to me.
You want to do 6 o'clock?
Which, was that, did you say 28th, 29th?
28th?
28th.
Tuesday the 28th? Is 6 o'clock okay?
I am out of town.
Oh, that, also the 29th?
Well,
Probably ought to try to have all of you there, so if that doesn't work for you, Bill, we could revisit this question maybe in our August 7 meeting. Let me bring this question up again, and I can report whether we think staff will be ready by a certain point in time and come back. Want to keep moving it along, though. And then the field trip to see the pickleball courts. Mayor has recommended this.
And it's instruction.
Oh, instruction, that's
Yes.
right. Introduced to the
Yes.
game, so
We're gonna play ourselves some pickleball.
Yes.
play it.
And it's a game that no matter where you stand on your workout, that you can do and play. I don't know how many of you played it,
I
but
played it, yeah. It's-
okay.
That's
And-
what
And when do you, when
And
is
I
this?
won't. I would say if you come, I was going to say I'll treat you ice cream, but that's not staying with fitness. I'll bring like the Gatorade.
So,
And when is this?
well, I haven't,
We just need to find a date.
I haven't suggested a date here.
Just give me 2 or 3 dates
You
so I
wanna
can go
sub-
back to the pickleball instructor and also the head of the Utah Pickleball Association. So, a couple, 3 dates if.
Do you want me to do that by email, put out some choices maybe?
That'd be great.
Okay, via email. Mackenzie's learned how to do this doodle poll thing, and she could send out a doodle poll with some various dates for you to react to. Mayor, we'll consult with you before we do that, okay?
Okay.
And then the work session with the Youth Council is tentatively set for September 4th. Lisa Summers has suggested that. This is your annual work session with them before your regular meeting. Would that be okay? Okay. All right, I'm good.
So I have a comment because I found it kind of an interesting alignment of the stars that we had this long list of work sessions and extra meeting nights, et cetera. And in another board discussion about compensation, it came up, this was just yesterday, that it's fairly common to, if you're compensating per meeting, which we don't do that, that's a little bit different than what we do, but to have a 4-hour limit on the meeting, and then to have extra meetings be compensated as, it's getting late, so what's the word? A stipend. Anyway, so I just thought that was interesting. I'm personally in a situation where I'm facing kind of a 4-hour limit of time that I can be gone. And so there's that, and then there's, what is the acceptable length of meeting before it's count as kind of overtime for our job, right? And extra meetings. And so I just wanted to throw that out there for the council to think about. I know that this is our year to review compensation, which we already did, but it's still within the year, and I think we could bring it back up if we felt like we wanted to address that. Because I do think that this council is extraordinarily thorough, much more so than any council I've ever watched in the past, and that there is a lot of benefit to these extra meetings and field trips and things that we're really digging deep into. But there are extra real demands on our time and our families and that sort of thing. So I just think it's a good idea for us to think about what are our goals as far as time limits per day or night, and if we run to that time limit, then do we set aside those extra meetings, and then should those extra meetings be compensated?
If you guys haven't heard of mine, my theory is, at least me, maybe not you guys, but my brain after 10 o'clock kind of goes to mush. So I don't like going past then. And I'm trying on some of these extra meetings not to have them. If we can, for instance, solve this tax increment thing without another meeting when we've already had a couple, then if that's okay with everybody, that's what I'm looking to do. To take care of some things, but I think Tammy, you're agreeing that there's some cases that you do need a work session, but it's a good question.
Which I don't mind. I just think we need to be sensitive and try to keep boundaries around it. So.
Okay, so if I could go on then to the county grant
Could I just throw in one more? the police training that's available to us. The virtual training that they're doing is the 30th of this month from 2:30 to 5. And it's free and it's intense. And my understanding is that you can participate or watch. But
And when is this?
I think there was an email sent out on that,
it's the
wasn't there?
30th of this month. It's Monday from 2:30 to 5. It's out on about 53rd South.
So I recall, I think an email went out from the chief, and if you wanted to resend that out, Stephanie, you could
Yep, I could forward
do that to him to remind him of that opportunity.
And things, I just want you, things like I put together, like this pickleball instruction, I mean, that's introducing to the game, seeing if that's something we want to look at, but that is something you don't have to do, I'd love to have you do it, and that's something you also bring your families as well too, you know, to it as well too.
It's a fantastic game and opportunity.
Yeah, so that's a fun
No
thing.
complaint about
Yeah.
the idea, absolutely.
So,
So my other item is, I want to make sure whether you're okay with the other grant application. I've sent a letter of intent on, and that's the South Frontage Road, because we also faced a deadline there before I had a chance to come back to you. So I sent a letter of intent for the July 14 deadline, and this is for the county's Proposition 1 money. You might recall, we had a joint application with West Bountiful last year, which provided some money for the 1250 West connection improvements between us and West Bountiful. And this time, the staff felt like the most competitive project we probably had was South Frontage Road, doing some widening to accommodate to bike lanes on both sides of that, using the property owners on the east side who would be contributing towards the cost, providing much of the match. But it's also a road we have to apply some of our own money to for a slurry sale, so putting all those things in a package seemed to make sense. Unless you object, then we would prepare an application for the September 8th deadline based on that letter of intent. We would include Bountiful as a supporter of that because the south end of that road is in Bountiful, and I've talked to their city manager. He's willing to, he thinks they're willing to sign a letter of support on that. That gets us some extra points probably in the scoring process. Any objection to us submitting that? Okay. And that's all I have, other than Lisa has a very brief report.
Did we decide on 5:30 on the 28th?
On
didn't
August
decide on that,
28th, I was going to come back and ask you about that one.
yeah, Bill,
I can
Bill-
join that one by phone, but I am out of town. August 28th.
Yeah, that would be a fairly long one, though, so I think we better talk about another night. Let
I
me
can-
come back and ask you another
Yeah, I
night.
thought that's what we did, is you were gonna come back.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be at Lake Powell again that week.
Let's pick a night you can all be here.
thanks, Steve. Lisa, do you want to give us a quick update on the fireworks legislation then?
Sure, I was just asked to give a quick update on the implementation of HB 38, which was implementing these new fireworks restrictions, where I had explained that by May 1st of each year, the cities give the county the map, and then by June 1st, the county does a map for all the retailers. So I talked to the county attorney's office, and also reviewed the effective date of the statute. So the effective date of the statute is May 8th, which means we couldn't really, apply the May 1st. So my opinion is that this is going to be implemented next year for the fireworks season. And I talked to the county attorney's office, and they said, yeah, that's their reading of it, that they have not ramped up this year. They'll be doing it next year. So I've asked the city recorder to calendar May 1st. I think it's going to be a little problematic because usually we do not get the letter from the fire chief saying in June that it's really dry, and then usually the beginning of June or end of June we adopt that or re-adopt the map. So we're just going to have to get the letter from the chief in April so that we can take action. But usually if we keep the boundaries the same, it's not going to be problematic. So
I did see the map posted at Dick's.
Yes,
So-
well, what Steve's idea was when we got this call last week was, well, it's not required this year, was my interpretation, although we sent the map to the county and said, are you going to do it this year? And, you know, the county attorney said we were the only city that responded and even asked
Yay,
about it.
Lisa.
And so, well, yay, city council. So Steve said, let's just send a staff member around to the retailers and see if they will voluntarily post the map, which is what we did. So I appreciate Steve and the
Police
police
officer.
department's
We sent a police
effort
officer
on
around.
that.
Well, that was good.
That
But,
was
and,
good.
and another question I received was whether the retailers would just post the map or if they would also post the restrictive dates and times. And the statute does say that they post the map, the restrictive dates and times, and also the new increased penalties will be posted. So next year you'll see that.
Thank you. So at this point in time, there is a reason to move into a closed meeting. I think we can complete the council meeting and just go into that closed meeting, unless anyone else has anything else.
Did you have any appointments, Mayor?
I'll wait till next time.
Okay.
Motion to go into closed meeting for purposes allowed by state law to discuss the character and competence of an individual and with no intent to return to the public session.
Second?
The motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Council meeting closed.
And all staff can be excused other than myself.
Yes.